Hello. We were going to discuss how Jesus came to fulfill the law today. But as life just began to happen, I sensed that God was saying, Maureen, tell them your story. And so I'm going to share with you my testimony. I'm not going to go into detail, like a lot of detail, mainly because not everybody is ready. And there are certain parts of my story that aren't just my story, they belong to other people. I was born to a theology student and his teacher wife in Kansas City. My dad was a seminary student at the Nazarene Seminary College at the time. Now it's called Nazarene Theological Seminary. That's it. Thank you. I had to think about that for a minute. It's 1:40 in the morning, and I'm awake. not my favorite thing, but it's not the worst thing. My dad loved God. In fact, my dad actually didn't give his life to Christ until a couple of weeks after he married my mom. But God had given my mother the peace that she needed to know that it was okay and that God was fine with her marrying my dad because he had a plan. So a couple of weeks after my mom and my dad got married, he gave his life to Christ. And then a couple of months after that, he felt that the Lord was calling him to go to college to become a pastor. And so my dad finished up seminary when I was 2.5. And when I was almost 3, we moved to this little teeny tiny town. And I'm going to say the name, and most of you are going to be like, I have no idea where that is. It was called Lindsay, Oklahoma. It was just this little tiny place. And it was a small church. There was actually, I believe, 15 members on the roster, my mom said, and only 5 of them actually attended. And by the time my dad left, they were up to 35 finally. And he was only the pastor there for 2.5, not quite 3 years. Not quite 3 years, because we moved right before my 3rd birthday to Lindsay. But that wasn't what happened. My dad was working on the car, and the car fell on him. And my mom was pregnant with my little sister, and my little brother wasn't even 2. And my mother had to raise 3 of us all on her own. And it was not easy, because she had her own grief, but we had our grief. Well, I had my grief. Matt and Meg pretty much didn't even understand what was going on because Meg wasn't even born when Dad died. And Matthew was a mama's boy. So, give me 2 seconds. Thank you. I had something stuck, and I didn't want you to watch me get it out. And so we had to give up the parsonage, and we had to move. This is so sad. There's this really sweet woman from Southern Nazarene, where I went to college, who friended me, and she's like, "Don't you remember me?" And I'm like, help me remember you. And she's like, "My dad is the one who took over the church after your dad died." Well, no, sadly, I'm sorry, Donna, if you're watching this. I didn't remember because there were a lot of things that were going on. And it all just I was only 5. So, but he was a really nice man. I remember that they came to visit to get to know the church. And what was really nice, though, was that the people from my grandmother's church, there was a man and his son, and they had their own moving company. And they did not charge my mom anything. They came and my mom did all of the packing, and she was pregnant at the time. She was 5.5 months pregnant when my dad died because, I think about 5.5 months. Because Meg was born in December and Dad died in mid-August. So in early November, the Traywicks came and they loaded up our moving van. They moved this huge truck. And all of the men from my grandma's church came and they helped move us into an apartment. And so we spent Christmas in an apartment. And then she and my mom and my grandma bought a house. And for 3 years, it was fairly uneventful. First, second, third grade. There wasn't like anything really bad. It was actually kind of quiet and peaceful. At least it was for me. From what I understand now, it wasn't so much for my mother. When I was in the tail end of third grade, my mom met this guy and they started dating. And I love my grandma. And she was right, by the way. She had a bad feeling about this man. And she told my mom, please don't marry him. And my grandma didn't know when to quit. And my mom actually married him to get away from my grandma, thinking it would be better. Not knowing, because my mom was from the generation where you didn't talk about mental illness and you didn't discuss abuse. My mom didn't understand that he was mentally ill and that my grandma understood that, because my grandma just kind of had a sixth sense, if you will. Like the Lord just blessed her with intuition in that way. And I actually have a very similar intuition. I have met more than a few people and I'm like, you seem really nice, but something's not right with you. And it always, usually, I would say 99% of the time, I'm not wrong. They have a traumatic brain injury, or maybe they're not mentally cognizant. Because my daughter Elizabeth is autistic, I can usually spot them fairly quickly. And I can see it when I meet other autistic people now, especially when they're small children, because Elizabeth was very rambunctious and she had a hard time sitting still. And I see them and I'm like, I know what's going on with you. But I usually don't say anything unless the parents are just like, unless they happen to share that they had already received a diagnosis. But she married this man and we all thought, yay, we're getting a dad. And we even called him dad for a few months. And they got married in November. And in April, there was this really bad truck accident. My stepdad drove a sand truck for a friend of ours, their mixing company. They're called Shorts Ready Mix. I can't ever remember, and so I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's not cement, it's concrete, I want to say. Anyway, they're really big in Oklahoma. And he was working for them, and her best friend's husband was the owner of the company. But this woman had pulled out in front of my stepdad. She had just lost custody of her kids, and she did it on purpose. Because she was, if I can't have my kids, then nobody's going to have my kids mentality. Not a good mentality to have, by the way. Long story short, Jim ended up having a nervous breakdown. What we didn't know was that he had PTSD from doing multiple tours of Vietnam. And we also didn't know that he was bipolar. For those of you who don't understand what that means, it means, well, for us, it was like living with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and we never knew which one we were going to get from minute to minute. And it got so bad that my mom, before 2 years of marriage was over, said, that's it, we're done. Goodbye, sayonara, see you later. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, adieu. And we went from being comfortable to not very comfortable very quickly, overnight, actually. But we had my dad's death benefits, and so my mom was able to pay rent, and most of the time she was able to pay the bills, but sometimes not. And so I remember more than a few times my mom I could hear her crying in the night, going, God, I don't know how we're going to do this. I need to help us. And the Lord sometimes provided anonymously, and sometimes my mother had to swallow her pride and ask our church for help. And that was not easy. But my mom taught me that pride doesn't really do you any good. Why? When we're proud and we hold on to I can be independent and do things on my own, it doesn't do us any good. Pardon me. It doesn't help us at all. In fact, it hinders us, and it makes it much more difficult for God to help us because we're not willing to give up control, and that's very difficult. And so I started babysitting when I was 12. And my babysitting money actually paid so I could go on youth trips. I was able to buy my own clothes to do the things that I wanted to do. I kind of became a bit of a shoe horse. I loved shoes then. I think I have like 3 pair, maybe 4. But they're really good made shoes. They're not like the cheap ones because I bought cheap shoes. I'll never buy cheap shoes again. But that's another story for another day. And when I started high school, I kind of started sneaking around, and I had a couple of boyfriends, and they weren't nice. And that's all I'm going to say about that. They weren't nice. But God had a plan, because by the time I got done with my 9th grade year, I had a plan to end my life. I was just going to wait until my brother and my sister weren't home and they were outside playing and my mom was in school. And when I got up the courage, I was just going to take a whole bottle of Tylenol and just go to sleep and just not wake up. I didn't know then that that's not how that would work out, by the way. I know that now. That if you're thinking about that, that doesn't work. Not the way you think it does. And it's not a good way to go. Don't do that. Don't take a bottle of Tylenol and think you're going to go to sleep and just make it. You're not. So, but I had a plan. I was just working up the courage. But God knew that I needed a break. Our human psyche and how we see each other, how we see ourselves, and how we value ourselves is determined by our childhood, a lot of it. Now, that does not mean that God can't turn all of that around and change it. Okay? Because with God, all things are possible. I had a good foundation. I had a mom who loved me, and up until his death, my dad loved me. My grandma Taylor was kind of bossy and domineering, but she loved me. And my mom's sister, Aunt Nina, and Uncle Ed, they loved us. We were loved children. And up until Jim, other than the fact that we didn't have a dad, we had a fairly happy childhood. You know? And my brother and my sister don't remember that. Not very much of it. Because they were too little. I apologize. I have really bad allergies, and I live in Washington, the land. If you have allergies, don't move up here. It won't do you any good. In fact, if anything, you will be like, oh my word, what have I done? Especially if you're allergic to mold. But Jim got in just under the radar, and he was sadistic. He'd say things like, I want to love you, but I can't. Because you're just not worth it. Or he would play jokes that weren't funny at all. They were really twisted and sick. But you have to understand that Jim was sick and twisted. His brain, it wasn't just that his brain was diseased, it's that his whole childhood was diseased. His mother was a schizophrenic, and his father was an alcoholic in the army who came home long enough to beat Jim's mom up and then get her pregnant until the state stepped in. And he grew up in foster care and boys' homes. So he was not a healthy man emotionally. And the thing is that his paranoia was an asset to the Army at the time. And so they didn't think anything of it. But then when he had his nervous breakdown, everything just came to the surface, and it got bad fast. And when it did, I was his target. You know, they say that abusers always pick one specific person. I was that person. And it was not fun. He really did a lot of damage for a long time. I was always afraid of my mom dying. One of my things was I had been afraid that my mom would die. And what if my mother died and we had to go to gym? And I remember one day she sat down with me and she told me, she's like, no. She was like, that was never an option when I began to realize that he liked Matt and Meg, but he didn't like you. She said, no. I went, she had her will rewritten, and we were actually supposed to go to an aunt, uncle on my dad's side of the family, which actually gave me a lot of relief. But I was like 17 or 18 before she told me that. So I spent a few years tied in knots. And middle school kids aren't nice anyway, but when you've already had some really crappy stuff happen, because my dad didn't just die, I was molested the year before. And then we have this mentally ill man who wants to be a good dad, but he doesn't know how because he doesn't have the tools, and he's abusive because that's all he knew how to do. It really messes you up. And so I got to my freshman year of college, and being in Kansas was a very positive thing for me, and it was a very good thing, and it gave me 3 years of rest so that God could kind of build me up, which is probably the only reason why I survived my freshman year. Because by the end of my freshman year, I was afraid to leave my dorm room. I wasn't sleeping. I was scared of my own shadow. I was scared of somebody that wasn't even on campus anymore, but he had hurt me really, really badly. He had hurt my heart. He had messed with my head, and he wasn't even my boyfriend. That's the stupidest part of it all. But I had to be liked. This thing inside of me said that maybe if I had been more likable, then maybe Jim would have liked me for me. I didn't understand that it wasn't my problem. It was his. But God knew. And he knew that he had to break me down to rebuild me. He had to let me fall apart so that he could strengthen me. He talks, there's the refiner's fire. They talk about that in the Bible. And when you make a sword or you make metal, there is a whole process of things that they have to do. And one of those things is they have to refine and purify, and they have to get rid of all of the garbage. And so at the time, I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be gross. It's driving me crazy. I'll take some Zyrtec when I'm done. When they are making metal, they have to get rid of all of the impurities. Metal doesn't come purified. Stainless steel, 1810 stainless steel doesn't start off that way. It has to be melted down, and all of the impurities have to rise to the surface, and they skim it off. And they keep doing that until as many of the impurities as they can possibly get come out of that metal to make it strong and ready to face whatever it is it has to do. For a long time, it was to face battle and to be a sword. And I didn't realize at the time, in fact, I really used to gripe and complain a lot. How come this is happening to me? Why can't this happen to somebody else? It was like, look at them over there. They have these happy-go-lucky lives, and their biggest problem is who's going to take them to the banquet or to whatever school function is going on. It's like, I would love for that to be my only worry, because I was also worried about my family. I'm the oldest, and as as it tends to run, not always, but often, the oldest child tends to take on a lot of the burdens on themselves. Sometimes it's put on them by their parents. Now, my mom tried her hardest to let me be a kid as much as she possibly could, but sometimes that just wasn't possible. It wasn't because she wanted to, it's because she just didn't know what else to do. And so I ended up helping raise my brother and my sister. And I love my brother and my sister, but my mom and I sheltered them a lot more than I was sheltered. And they were kind of spoiled and ungrateful and very entitled. I love them to pieces, but they are. And so I didn't know why for a really long time. Why me? Why this? Why can't this be somebody else? And then our house caught on fire in 1995 as we were moving out, and we lost a lot of stuff. I still have my mom's china, but it's not a complete set anymore. All of my mother's china, a lot of it was destroyed in the fire. And how the fire started is not important. But we lost our living room furniture. My mother had purchased a brand new refrigerator before we moved back to Oklahoma. And that was gone. The only thing that didn't happen was it didn't get our bedrooms because we had undone our bedrooms and moved those first. Years of moving had taught us that the beds are the last thing to go in the truck, and they are the first things you put together because at the end of the day, you're just going to want to go to bed and you're going to need to get some rest. And so that actually saved our bacon, except we had no more living room furniture. We had no more dining room furniture. We didn't have a refrigerator anymore. We lost our microwave. We lost a lot of stuff. And that was really crappy because 93 was when I had my breakdown, and 94 was spent with God slowly refining and taking out some of those impurities and beginning to start to strengthen me and make me tougher and stronger. And then in 96, my grandma was trying to be very helpful, and it was very kind of her to do this. My brother had moved in with her because Matthew and Meg had gotten into drugs, but Matthew had given his life to Christ. And so my grandma opened up her home to my brother, but she was watching my sister because my little sister was very rebellious, and she didn't understand everything that was going on. And there's a whole underlying issue behind that it's not my story to tell. And so I can't divulge anything about it because it's my family's place to decide who knows what, when, where. And this is a very public forum, and it's not something I can discuss because it didn't happen to me specifically. So we had the house fire, and then my grandma told my mom that she was praying sacrificially again. And I remember my mom and I, that very day, February 23rd, my mom and I went to lunch together because my mother's birthday is 2 days before my birthday. And so we always celebrated our birthdays together. And so I took her to lunch and she took me to lunch, and we got me my new glasses because I really needed them because I'd been in a car accident a couple of months before, and we realized it was because my glasses were really, really old. The joys of being a poor college student with no health insurance or vision insurance. And so we were actually on our way home, and I was taking Mom to work. She went in, she grabbed all of her work stuff because she was working at Walmart as a door greeter by then, because she couldn't find teaching work, and substitute teaching doesn't really pay anything. And she was actually working full time and supposed to get health insurance, but it hadn't started yet. And she'd actually got to work and asked that day, hey, do I have health insurance? Not yet, Lorraine, but it's on its way. I promise. We're working on it to get it through as fast as we can. But as I was taking my mom to work, we had to pull over. And I remember we watched 1, 2, 3, 4 police cruisers. And then there comes 5, 6, 7, 8. An ambulance is coming. A fire truck is coming. And they are going right past us, and they're turning left. and they're heading down towards 10th Street and Garth Brooks Boulevard. And I remember my mom and I, we sat there and we're like, Lord, we don't know what's going on, but whatever it is, it's really bad. And please be with the people that are being affected by this. It was my grandma, my brother, and my sister. I took my mom to work and I went to work, and my mom called my job and told them, listen, don't let her drive. Don't tell her anything. Just bring her to Baptist. And my brother will never be the same. He has a traumatic brain injury. And we lost my grandma. My brother was in one hospital and my sister was in another, and his girlfriend was on another, and it was really crappy. 96 stunk. And then my brother got an infection and he almost died again. I've been that woman that has sat in the car and been like, what is your problem, God? What? We haven't served you enough. We haven't done enough. What is your deal? Because quite honestly, I'm just really fed up with all the... Let somebody else's life suck for once. That was my prayer in my car at the time. I was done. Matthew was dying and he hadn't turned around yet. I mean, and it was coming, but it hadn't happened yet. I was just like, what more do you need from us? It's like, so what? You're going to take everything away from us? You know what? Go find somebody else to strengthen and to give them character. I have enough character. I'm really tired of this. Well, it wasn't done because I got to spend the next couple of years basically moving in and out of the dorms and not really certain each summer where exactly I was going to live. And then I got to go to Sicily in 99. Now, you have to understand something. I never should have been able to go to Sicily. Not even remotely. I often did not have enough quarters to do my laundry, and so I had to do my laundry in the bathtub in the dorm. And I had a job. It just didn't pay very well. I had a job. It just didn't pay very well. And it barely covered my books and my school. And I remember in chapel, and they were talking about Nazarenes and Volunteer Service, which was a volunteer missions program for youth in our college. And the year before, in 97, he's like, Maureen, I want you to go and do that. And I was just like, God, I want to do that, but I still owe money on my car. I owe the school money. And you know what, Lord? When I don't owe the school any more money and I own my car outright, I will go. Because I was turning 23 the next year. And God's like, okay, I'm going to hold you to that. So fast forward to November of 1998. And I was sitting once again in chapel. And it just kind of, I didn't even have to go to chapel. I was over 22. I was no longer required to attend Southern Nazarenes Chapel, but I would go sometimes because they were really good. And there were times when I would just go and the Lord would speak to me. And I was sitting there and Dr. Culbertson was talking about how they needed people in Croatia and they needed NIVS. And there's that little voice. Hey, you could go. You know, you told me that when you owned your car and you didn't have a loan anymore and you didn't owe S&U any more money, that you would go. I owned my car. I no longer owed S&U any money. And I was like, you know what, Lord, you're right. That is what I said. Okay, I'll go. And I went and I talked to Dr. Culbertson after chapel. I actually skipped class. It was bad. I was a bad monkey. I skipped class and I went and I talked to Dr. Culbertson. And when I was done, I walked to the administration office and I dropped out of the next semester. And I was like, I'm going to Sicily. And it was the week of Thanksgiving, by the way. they had classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and well, actually, yeah, no, usually Wednesday, and so people would, drive home and then come back before Monday. And I remember we were having Thanksgiving at my Aunt Chris and Uncle Frank's house, who had bought my grandma's house, and I told them, I was like, I'm going to Sicily next semester. I'm gonna go spend a year overseas as a volunteer missionary. Now, my aunts and my mom are all women of faith. My oldest aunt and her husband are missionaries. And she was the first one who told me I was crazy. But she also said, once you have your first $100, I'll give you $100 and a suitcase. And she did, which was nice because I needed a suitcase really badly, actually, because the ones I bought as a graduation gift didn't make it. They were starting to show wear and tear. And so, give me 5 seconds. For the record, crying doesn't help. It makes my nose more runny. But the Lord opened the doors in miraculous ways he should not have. And as soon as I got back, I began calling churches and making arrangements so that I could go and speak in churches and asking for help, because a lot of us had to do that back then. I wasn't the only college student who couldn't really afford to do that. College students, as a rule, we don't really have like a whole lot of money lying around. When you see those movies and they've got those rich college students, none of my friends were any of those. I didn't go to school with a lot of those. I mean, they had parents who were doing fairly well and they were able to help buy them a car, but that was maybe the extent of it. And my mom wasn't even able to help me do that because she just didn't have that kind of money. But she always tried as much as she could to give me a place to stay if that was possible. And so I remember, it was actually mid-February. And everybody was just like, Maureen, I just don't think you're going to make it. And I was just like, I had gone to all of the churches I could possibly go to and spoken to them. And I was just like, I remember my mom's like, honey, I just don't think this is going to happen for you. And so I went and I took a nice long walk because we were staying with this really nice woman who had she had like an acre and a half land. And I was walking in I went for a walk and I was like, God,